It's not just any Wednesday, it's the last Wednesday of 2025, the last day of 2025, and it's a Stock Watch Wednesday. We're going to talk about what we're buying, selling, holding, about the Guardians lineup going into 2026.
You are Locked On Guardians, your daily podcast on the Cleveland Guardians. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome on in, Guardians fans. What's going on? It's time for your favorite half hour of the day, because you know it's our favorite half hour of the day too, because for the next half hour, we're talking about your Cleveland Guardians, the only daily podcast, Locked On Guardians, that covers your team every day from the majors, the minors, the draft, and everything in between. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the number one sports podcast network. I'm Justin Latta, one of your two co-hosts for the last 3 years and counting, and we're coming up on 4, so that's great. With my friend and coach, Jeff Ellis, who is off for the holiday. And I have spent the previous 18 years and counting covering the Guardians minor league system as a prospect writer and editor. So we're going out 2025 with a bang. We're going to do our last round of stock watches in 2025, what we're buying, selling, and holding for 2026. We're buying a rebound for a Guardians offensive player. We'll talk about selling one of the platoon bats and holding on to some prospect hope. Later in the show, we'll get into roster projection 2.0, and you'll see some of the choices I made are based off of the buy, sell, and hold round. And there's a realistic trade candidate we probably haven't really talked about. I think we did mention his name, but I think it's the time to revisit this name and think it might be the piece that's most realistic, and it feels like it would be a reasonable upgrade. Today's episode of Locked On Guardians brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. If you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live and NBA as well. Bets all season long. Thank you all for being here all year long, talking Guardians baseball with us. It's the reason we show up. You guys, all of you that are into Guardians baseball, we love the community we have been a part of. We're always appreciative of you making Locked On Guardians your first listen today and every day, wherever it is you get podcasts. And of course, shout out to all of our everydayers. Shout out to all the insiders, all the commenters that keep things percolating all year long, even when it's cold and snowy in Ohio and there hasn't been Cleveland baseball news in, I don't think, since the Sean Armstrong signing. So it's been pretty cold in terms of the stove and pretty cold in terms of the weather. So let's warm that up a little bit with some baseball talk here. And we're doing the buy, sell, hold here in the first segment. The first thing I am buying for the Guardians in 2026 is I am buying a David Fry rebound platoon splits against left-handed pitchers. So I was kind of going through, I'm going to throw out his 2025. It was a mess, right? He was coming off of Tommy John surgery. His season started late. Things never really got on track for him in the minors during his rehab. We watched some of the at-bats, we saw the numbers. Nothing really looked like he had things going. And I always think that guys who miss spring training every year, they don't get to have a normal off season. They go into spring training and they miss it with an injury or something, and they're rehabbing, and they're not having normal off season, normal spring training. They spend the entire year trying to play catch up. They are doing a lot of rehab stuff and just trying to make up for lost time. And I think that gets into a lot of guys' heads, and they're trying to, make up for lost stats, lost time. So I am willing to throw out David Fry's entire 2025 numbers. I'm willing to look at 2024. And, that there was a point during the year where he obviously had the elbow injury. He couldn't catch anymore. He can only DH. And I think that also impacted some of his numbers, because it wasn't just right-handed pitching that he struggled with in 2024 after the injury. He struggled across the board against lefties and righties. Tommy John doesn't affect your hitting, so it's safe to hit when you're having that elbow injury. We've seen guys do it before, but it doesn't mean you're 100%. Things are still going to hurt. Things are still going to have issues. You're going to be compensating possibly. And if he was hitting great against lefties and bad against righties, I wouldn't, put any sort of stock behind that. I wouldn't buy it, because I would think that, well, it doesn't matter. He's still doing the same thing, but he struggled against both sides. So I'm willing to chalk that up to the injury. And I went deep on some stats against lefties for David Fry. His pull rate in the air, so we're talking pulled air balls, which is what results in home runs, is good against lefties. It's better chase rate against lefties. He's middle of the pack in the barrel rate. All of his expected stats are pretty good there. The whiff rates, the strikeout rates, all a little bit better or middle of the pack across the board, right? The other thing I thought was interesting too is I dug into what David Fry succeeded at in 2024 offensively, and that was early on he wasn't seeing a lot of fastballs, right? He was hammering them. He was seeing a lot of changeups, which he did well early, but struggled later on with. But against fastballs, 94 and over. So the major league fastball now these days, the average fastball is 94 miles an hour. David Fry had a 435 batting average in 2024 against fastballs 94 and harder. The expected batting average was 330, so he overperformed a little bit. 480 on base, expected on base was 389. 826 slug against fastballs 94 and higher. Expected slug was 615. So he did outperform some of those metrics, but even the expected stats were still pretty darn good against higher velocity. He had a really poor June and July. He was below average again in August, rebounded in September. He really struggled with changeups later in the year, and I kind of wonder if that was, teams starting to see the approach there. Maybe he was chasing a little bit more. Maybe he was compensating, trying to start early. So I'm willing to give David Fry a bit of a mulligan for last year. Now, I'm kind of worried about the ball he took off the face, obviously, from Tarek Skubal. And I don't know how that affects his entire offseason as far as can he get back to having a regular training regiment. I hope he comes to spring training, having a normal offseason. And if he does, I feel confident in David Fry being a guy against lefties who can bring some balance to the lineup they really need. So there's another player on the platoon side of things that I'm not buying. I'm selling, and I'm selling very hard on this one. And that is Angel Martinez against left-handed pitching. The numbers last year were better. He was one of, let me look real quick. I did look up the stats before this. He was one of, he didn't have 150 at bats. So there were only 24 players last year that had 200 at bats against lefties. If we narrow that down to 150 from 200, we get 92 batters against left-handed pitching. And Angel Martinez was 26 in WRC plus against left-handed pitchers last year in baseball at a 123. The expected stats, however, do not back that up as sustainable. The metrics do not support that was something that he's better than. His chase rate was 30% against lefties, which is right in line with where he is normally with chase rate, which is 39%. So it's a little bit lower, but it's still not good. A 52% pull rate. That's the one good percentage. So Angel Martinez pulls the ball in the air very effectively. This is the one thing he does well. His average exit velocity against lefties, by the way, is lower than it is normally. His exit velocity last year average was 87.1. It was 84 against lefties last year. He had a 29.3% hard hit rate for the year, only 33% hard hit rate against lefties. So the hard hit rate doesn't increase very much. The launch angle against lefties is a little bit lower. There is not a single metric outside of pulling the ball that supports what Angel Martinez did against lefties last year. Not one. And if we look at the splits for him to, batting average on balls in play against lefties was not unrealistic. It was 327. It's going to be a little bit higher. It's going to be high. It's probably a little bit unsustainable because he doesn't hit the ball hard enough. Now he does run well. It was a 48 against righties as a left-handed batter. I think this is a lot of noise. The chase rate, the fact he doesn't hit the ball hard, the launch angle, he doesn't barrel the ball any better against lefties. There's not a metric I can look at and say, okay, this is the thing that sustains him against lefties. This is what he can build on. This is what you can trust. Is a repeatable data point for him. There's not a repeatable data point for Angel Martinez. I am not buying him as a left-handed platoon guy in center field. I don't think it's something he can repeat in 2026. I've got one prospect that I'm holding on to hope for in 2026 for a rebound for a full season. And then we'll talk about roster projection 2.0. And then we'll get into the trade candidate we have been ignoring all this time, coming up on the rest of today's Locked On Guardians. Friday is the best day of the week. Don't debate me on that. I won't hear it. And Fridays, they feel a little bit different during basketball season. FanDuel is making them even better. Every Friday night before the game tips off, FanDuel gives fans a new way to kick off the weekend with NBA Happy Hour. So NBA Happy Hour is your official pregame, a limited time window where special offers are going to drop right in the FanDuel app right before the action starts. So from Fridays from 6 to 7:30 Eastern, this is appointment NBA viewing during NBA Happy Hour. The opening of the FanDuel app and during Happy Hour always brings something new. Boost, bonuses, and surprises during those games. It's right before those Friday night games before the weekend starts. Adds a little extra energy to Friday night basketball without overthinking about it. The Cavs, they're hosting the Nuggets on Friday night as the new year starts. The Nuggets won't have Nikola Jokic, so that could be an interesting one to take a look at. So before tip-off, you want to check out your FanDuel app and see what's dropping during NBA Happy Hour every Friday, 6 to 7:30 Eastern. A little basketball, a little action, whole lot of Friday energy. That's NBA Happy Hour only on FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NBA. Thank you, as always, everybody, for making Locked On Guardians your first listen today and every day wherever you get podcasts. Thank you for all your support throughout the year and really helping to make the network grow, make the show grow. We are now the number one sports podcast network in the world, and that feels really great to say. And the only reason we got there is because of you. So really appreciate that and really appreciate all the support. I had a great comment the other day, too. I have to find the name of the commenter. Talked about how he thought Jeff and I had like lightning in the bottle with the podcast. And I was like, wow, he really wanted to have us keep it going. Let me see if I can find. It was Jose Colader Ramirez. So Jose Ramirez commented, obviously, thought that we had lightning in the bottle. Hope we continue to work together covering the Guardians for a long time. We're going on year 4 together. Jeff's going on, I believe, a year 8 this year. So that'll be really exciting. If you're interested in getting more Guardians news, Guardians talk with your community, live your team every day. Take it up a level and go ad free. Join the Everydayer Club and get Locked On Guardians with no interruptions, members only, Discord access, and more for $5 a month or just $50 a year. You can go to lockedonguardians.supercast.com. Check the link in the show notes to learn more. But of course, we're always free on all of your audio platforms as well as YouTube every single day. We're back to 5 days a week in February 1st. So we restart 5 days a week in February. So one more month of us going 3 days a week, and hopefully the Guardians will give us more to talk about. Now, I can't believe I'm saying this. Jeff's going to roast me for this one. He won't believe it. But I said I was buying a David Fry rebound. I was selling Angel Martinez as a solid platoon bat against left-handed pitching. What I'm holding on to hope for, this is like a New Year's resolution hope. Chase DeLauter. There is a case, not much, but there is a comparison that I'm going to hold on to for DeLauter about him having a full season. I don't know what a full season looks like. I mean, Chase DeLauter has yet to play 100 games in a single season. He hasn't played full time since college. So that's a big ask. But there is an example out there of a very similar type player that has overcome injuries and has become a really good player. Has had a couple good seasons here now. And I'm talking about Byron Buxton. So Byron Buxton, obviously a lot of people know, plays for the Twins, really great player. He was the second overall pick in 2012. And there was a lot of chatter about Chase DeLauter going number 1 overall his draft year. And obviously the small school stuff, the swing, the issues in a very, very small sample against left-handed pitching that year. And of course, the injury is what knocked him down. That's why the Guardians pounced, because they thought they were getting a top, 5 talent down the board where they got him. Byron Buxton, he was a high school pick, right? He's very athletic, very good, a lot of ceiling. He played 140 games, in 2017. Didn't have a real great year. He had 16 home runs that year, 29 steals, but he had 511 plate appearances. I would kill for 100 games from Chase DeLauter for Cleveland in 2026. But, over the next several years for Byron Buxton, right, he He played 28 games. He played 87. We'll discount 2020. He played 61 in 2021, 92 in 2022, 85 games in 2023. But the last 2 years, he has played a combined 228 games. He played 126 this past year and had his best season of all time. Not his best in WRC plus, but the most home runs, the second most steals, the best FWAR. And he finally overcame some injuries. I'm not saying he will going forward. Who knows what will happen to him? But he was 31, and he had a mountain full of injuries all season long. And he finally played full time. He played in center field too. But you know what? He played really good center field. 3 outs above average in center field, 973 innings. Byron Buxton, had a reputation of always being hurt. And he had a great season at age 31 after all those injuries. I don't know what's going to happen with Chase DeLauter. I do know that foot injuries are especially devastating, and it could continue to hold with him. He's had, other injuries too, but Byron Buxton had all kinds of injuries throughout his career, always getting hurt, doing different things. So I'm going to hold out for hope that Chase DeLauter is going to play over 100 games in 2026. And they're going to be a good 100 games if he's on the field. Byron Buxton, like I said, recovered from a long career of injuries to do that. So that gives me some sort of probably unjustified hope about Chase DeLauter. We'll see what happens with that going to 2026. The other example too is Adrunas Ilgauskas. Basketball might be a little less demanding in terms of less games. You're not playing. You can rest on the bench, things like that. Whereas, during baseball, you're in the field. I guess it's the same when you're not hitting, but there's more games, more travel. So I don't know. It's kind of similar, but Z went through a lot of those same injuries too. So let me know what you're buying, you're selling, you're holding going into 2026 for the Guardians. Let me know what you think about my buy, sell, holds as well. Let's take a look at the Guardians roster and go through roster projection 2.0. I'll do the pitchers here and we'll move on to hitters later. And then I'll get into a hitter I think would complement this lineup very well in a trade target, because we're not going to be around for Trade Talk Thursday. We'll sneak one in here at the end of the year. So the rotation to me is pretty easy, right? You have Tanner Bivey, you have Gavin Williams. I think Joey Cantillo's got to be a number 3 starter. I'm a really big believer in Joey Cantillo being the 3rd starter this year. I think we saw a lot of great signs. We're going to talk more about him in future shows too. Joey Cantillo, I like him enough to make him the 3rd starter, I think, going into 2026. Slate Ciccone, I think he can build off of what he did too as well, putting him 4th. And then I'm sticking with Logan Allen. If they don't trade Logan Allen, right now I'm sticking to him as 5. I like the idea of Parker Messick going to AAA. I know he's not going to like that, obviously, in front of the show, who was on here, great dude, and really pitched his butt off at the end of 2025. But the Guardians just need the depth. And if they're going to hang on to Logan Allen and not use him as a trade chip, because as Jeff will tell you, there's value there. He may not have like huge return value, but there's value enough to return something of help for the Guardians. So if they hang on to him, I think he's the 5th starter, because I like the idea more of Parker Messick being in AAA. They need the depth. It's him and Peterson and Akazy and Cal Steven when he gets on the 40. They need the depth down there. They really do. The bullpen, I think, is also easy. Cade Smith and Sean Armstrong can both handle closer duties. They can both kind of be firemen. You've got Hunter Gaddis out there. I think bringing Matt Festa back makes a ton of sense. He pitched pretty well last year, and he's really cheap. I'm willing to give him another run next year, as long as he's pitching like the 6th inning or low leverage or medium leverage. Eric Sabrowski, I still like the stuff there. Tim Herron was better in the playoffs. I hope he can carry it over in next year and be back to what he was in 2024. Connor Brogdon's out of options. They gave him a contract, so I'll say he's in the bullpen, even though I think he could pass through waivers. And then I'm gonna see the Guardians carrying Peyton Pellett on the roster as the 8th reliever. I think it makes sense. I love the pick. Jeff and I both wanted the Guardians to target him. They did. And I think it makes sense to carry him as the 8th reliever, the 13th man on the roster, to soak up the low leverage, to soak up the blowout, cleaning up the messy innings when it's going good or bad either way, and seeing what they got out of him and see if he can transform into Trevor Stephan and become a guy who they do trust in leverage roles. So let me know what you think about the rotation and the bullpen. We're going to come back. We're going to talk about the lineup and see if you agree with my offensive roster projection 2.0, including the lineup. And then we'll get into a trade target. Even though it's not Trade Talk Thursday, we'll talk about a guy who we haven't really talked about enough that could be a great complement to this roster. And I think he's a realistic fit, so stick around. I know it's been a long off season, Guardians fans, because there hasn't been a ton of news. I know everyone's frustrated about not picking up the pieces of the lineup and the offense, but we are keeping you up to date on all things Guardians this offseason, whether it's moves, analysis, trying to break down rumors, as well as just trying to figure out where this team's going to go next year and how things are going to look. So if you want to keep up with all things Guardians this offseason, hit the bell on YouTube. You get notified of all the newest episodes when they go live, when we're 3 days a week this month, as well as when any news breaks, we'll add a fourth episode if it doesn't break on a day we're recording. Or you can get reaction videos to any pieces of news that come out as well. We'll do those. And you can auto download on all your audio platforms, wherever you get podcasts. We are literally everywhere, and we are always free no matter what. So you keep the show in your feed no matter what's going on, even if you're going to the gym, working on that New Year's resolution, you're walking the dog, you're doing the dishes, whatever it is. Auto download will always stay in your feed on Spotify, Apple, Pocket Cast, Overwatch, wherever you're listening. All right, let's get into the offensive side of roster projection 2.0, and let me know what you think. I did this one by lineup. Last time I just kind of did who I think is going to be on the roster. I did set up a specific lineup for this one. So my lineup for the Guardians against right-handed pitching looks like this. Quan leading off in left, I think makes sense. I have Chase DeLauter hitting second, playing center field. I think if you believe enough in Chase DeLauter to be on this roster on opening day, and he looks like the most impact player they're going to have going into next year, if they don't make any significant offseason additions, I want that guy front and center. And I want him in front of Jose. I want Jose protecting him. I think that helps him a ton against righties. Manzardo DH hitting fourth. Obviously, Jose is hitting third, playing third. No need to go into a whole lot about that. I think Manzardo hitting fourth makes a lot of sense still against righties. I put Bo Naylor fifth only because the guys behind him don't have the kind of power, patience, experience that you would need for a fifth hit. I don't love Bo Naylor hitting fifth, but in this case against righties, I'm okay with it for what they have right now. We'll talk about that more later on before we get out of here. So I have Bo Naylor hitting fifth. I put CJ Capus at first, hitting sixth. I like the power where he hits in sixth. I like him playing first because of the defense. But that's 3 straight lefties. That's, that could be an issue. You have guys off the bench who can break it up in terms of pinch hitting against a lefty. But I put Rocchio at short next just to break it up with a switch hitter. I put Valera down at 8th. I'm not as a high on Valera as I am DeLauter. And I want DeLauter getting the opportunities in front of Jose and in between Quan. I think that's where he's going to see the best pitches, and I think that's going to help him flourish if he's healthy. And I think you want to get the most out of him. And then, it's second hitting 9th. If it's Arias or Brito playing second base, I'll go there, hit those guys 9th. I like the idea of Brito hitting 9th just because he draws some walks and he is a switch hitter, so it breaks some of the lefties up. Or, Arias, who bats right-handed, even though it doesn't really matter what his offense is because we know what it is and what he can't do. So my big changes against lefties are this. Based on the current roster, hitting second, I do have Angel Martinez in center. I did say before I don't believe in him as a platoon bat against lefties based on the metrics. So I don't like it, but that's based on the current roster. I have him hitting second, playing center against lefties. Jose hitting third. The big one I have is David Fry playing right field and hitting fourth against lefties. If we're going to buy a David Fry rebound, I want him playing the field. I don't want him DHing because I want to be able to sub him out, move him around positions if I need to, other parts of the game, and I don't want him DHing. So I'll put him there at fourth. He could play catcher. He could play first. He could DH some days, but I want to keep him in the lineup, and I mostly want to keep him in the field. I have Manzardo hitting fifth and DHing. I think they got to play Manzardo against left field based on the current roster. I don't see any reason to platoon him. And he's got hit fifth. I think that's just the power you need. He's got to develop. And if you don't have another option, he's got to be the guy that develops in that spot in the middle of the order. That's what he's got to develop into. Hitting sixth to break up some of the lefties I have left here and just try to balance things. I have Brito and Arias, whoever plays. Brito's a switch hitter, hitting 6th. 7th, I kept Kafis in the lineup. Kafis did hit lefties fairly well in AAA last year. It was a limited sample, but it was pretty good. And, quite frankly, if I have David Fry in right field, I just don't have the other options. And I think that's the best chance to develop Kafis at first base and in this lineup. I put Hedges hitting 8th. I would prefer Hedges doesn't start hitting, but if Fry is in right field or not catching that day against lefties, I'm going to start Hedges and give Bo Naylor the platoon off and use him later, try to use that as leverage later in the game. So I'll start him there. He was okay against lefties last year. Not great, but why he's in there. And then Rocchio at short hitting 9th. Just a switch hitter, turn the lineup over. And then, of course, on the bench, you have Hedges when he doesn't play. I think Daniel Schneemann sticks around. One of Brito Arias if they don't start. And then I have Nolan Jones in the last outfield spot, strictly because he's out of options. And I don't know how the Guardians feel about him. They felt good enough about him to tender him a $2 million contract going into the year instead of DFAing him or whatever. So clearly there's something they believe in there. And I've seen some videos on Instagram about him going to drive line and working on his attack angles, working on his launch angle. And if I'm being honest, if I go to Nolan Jones's Savant page and if I stripped out the name, I would look at some of the data on his page and I would say, okay, good average exit velocity. He hits the ball hard. He finds the launch angle sweet spot sometimes pretty well. He draws walks. The chase rate's good. He's got a great arm. He's not a slow runner. He's not a fast. He's middle of the pack. And I would say if the Guardians were to give that guy a minor league deal, I would say, yeah, that's great. I love that idea. I think he can't be the only addition. He can't be the guy you're counting on, but I love him as a minor piece add to see if there's something there that you can take advantage of and capture. Of course, the Guardians didn't do that, and Nolan Jones makes $2 million. He's guaranteed a roster spot, guaranteed a contract, and there's no options there. The big thing for him last year, though, was the fact that he just didn't pull the ball in the air enough. He put the ball in the air a decent amount of time, but he could do more. He's done more in the past, and he doesn't pull it in the air enough. He did that really well in 2022. It's dropped off since then. So he's been working on that at Driveline. We'll see if that takes effect or not, but I guess he's coming into spring training, with the hope of doing that. So I think that's where that's going. All right, let me know what you think of roster projection 2.0, who you think is making the opening day roster. And as always, let's remember too, opening day, the roster is going to change, right? Like we always talk about opening day out of spring training being this key point in the season or key marker of the season. And it is, opening day roster is fun. You look at, okay, who's the guy that's going to step forward? Who's the big piece of this team? And then, by July or August, it totally changes. So remember, opening day is not the destination. It's just the start of it. So even when I'm looking at roster projections here for the start of the season based on the current roster, remember that's always going to change. And opening day is just one step of a long, long journey. So who makes that opening day isn't as big a deal as who plays the bulk of the season, who's here at the end of the year. And one of those guys that could be here at the start of the year that I didn't include in roster projection 2.0, but I would love to. Maybe I'm talking myself into it at this point of the offseason. Maybe I'm lowering my standards. I guess my standards weren't that high to begin with. Like, I talked about Rob Refsnyder and Brendan Donovan being a good offensive offseason for the Guardians and calling it a day. This guy, though, I'm willing to talk myself into is a trade target we have talked about. We haven't really spent a lot of time on, and that's Nico Hoerner from the Chicago Cubs, who to me makes a ton of sense. I've seen a lot of talk out there about how they would deal him. Now, he does have a no trade clause. He makes $11 million this year, but for $11 million for what he does, you're not going to find that on the open market right now for the Guardians to sign, even for 1 year. He's coming off his best year ever in terms of, Fangraphs WAR, defensive and offensive, a 109 WRC plus. Yes, there's only 7 home runs. I know it doesn't add power, and that's what the Guardians need. But Nico Hoerner does some things well. Like the launch angle sweet spot is what Stephen Kwan does well. He squares the ball up well. That's what Jose does well. He does chase quite a bit, and that's something the Guardians have gotten away from. But he doesn't strike out and doesn't miss a lot, and he doesn't really walk a ton, but he's a good defensive infielder. He runs really well. This is kind of the element the Guardians, I think, missed with Andres Gimenez, right? Like, there's not as much power for Nico Hoerner there, but he's only got 1 year left on the deal. I'd be willing to bring Nico Hoerner in to bounce between second and short, just so you're not solely relying on Arias and Rocchio to hold down the fort, or Brito, until you hope Bazzana gets up here. I would love to have a guy like Nico Hoerner for 1 year who can bounce between second and short, and when Bazzana, does make himself ready for the majors, whenever that is, you can move him between the two positions. He's a great defensive second baseman. He plays a very solid shortstop. It's been great before. Again, it's just 1 year. And again, I know it doesn't add power, but I've seen the talk about the Cubs would be interested in dealing him. He's got a waive and no trade clause, I know. But I'd be very interested. I think he'd be a great guy to hit second. He hits lefties very well. And actually, when I was doing my research on Angel Martinez and how he did against lefties and seeing what held up, Nico Hoerner came up in my search for numbers against lefties. Last year, he had a 369 batting average against lefties. He had a 162 WRC plus against lefties. It was a 369 BABIP, so there's going to be some regression there. But for his career against lefties, it's a 120 WRC plus. You're telling me you wouldn't take that guy against? I mean, I'd rather have him at second base than Arias or Brito. As much as I've always been a Brito guy since they got him, I would rather him go to the minor leagues again and get things on track, maybe learn the outfield a little bit more, those sorts of things. Hoerner can bounce between the two positions. And hey, look, if Bazzana comes up and Rocchio's great or Arias is great, whoever's playing shortstop is great and Hoerner's great, and you want to bring Bazzana up, well, guess what? You have an extra bat to trade. Look at that. That's never happened for the Guardians, not since the days of Richie Sexton and Brian Giles, okay? So you don't have too many bats. Let me know what you think of Nico Hoerner as a trade target. He's got 1 year left on his contract. The Cubs reportedly want some pitching. I'd be curious to see where they'd be asking for pitching for a guy who doesn't have power but has defensive value, speed, can hit, get on base, would be the ideal second hitter in this lineup, especially against lefties. Let me know what you'd be willing to give up for Nico Hoerner. I wouldn't give up Joey Cantillo. I don't think Logan Allen's quite enough. So it's an interesting area where you'd have to give up somebody for him. It's an interesting conundrum. All right, that's going to wrap up our final show of 2025. Once again, thank you all for hanging out with us, making us part of your routines, talking Guardians baseball. You guys are awesome and makes it worth it for us to show up every single day and talk Guardians baseball. No matter what's going on, it wouldn't be fun without you. We wouldn't be here without you. So we really do appreciate all of your support. And we'll be back in 2026 better than ever. You can always let us know what you're interested in hearing about, how we can improve. It's your show. We want to make it as good as we can talking Guardians baseball because we know you're not getting it anywhere else. We have a pitching prospect tools draft to still do. We're going to talk about how we evaluate prospects, what tools and stats we use. We have to talk about the graduated prospects and what we can expect from those graduated prospects in 2026. And we have a special interview in January with a pitching data guru. I'm excited for that one. And of course, we will cover any Guardians news that happens in the meantime. I want to wish all of you a happy new year, very safe, warm, successful, happy new year. I hope everyone finds peace, love, happiness, and some good Guardians baseball talk. So wish you and your family all of the best. Thank you for tuning in. We'll be back with you in 2026 to talk Guardians baseball. We cannot wait. Everybody have a great, happy, safe new year.